Allosaurus is one of the most iconic fossils from the Jurassic period, and as a large carnivorous theropod, Allosaurus has been featured in numerous documentaries about dinosaurs and has come to represent the classic Jurassic predatory dinosaur in our imaginations. With the estimated length of around 6 meters long, Allosaurus was smaller than its much younger cousin Tyrannosaurus rex, but considerably larger than Velociraptor. It's one of the climax predators of the Jurassic period in North America and Europe. My name is Benjamin Berger, and in this video, I'm telling the story of Allosaurus. The story of the first discovery of Allosaurus in the American West is tied up with the race to find dinosaur bones by two eccentric paleontologists, O.C. Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope. But preceding their race was a paleontologist by the name of Joseph Leidy, who would describe what many regarded as the first fossil specimen in 1870. Now, there's a bit of mystery and confusion about where this first specimen was found. The fossil was collected during an expedition to Colorado by the geologist Ferdinand Hayden in 1869. Now, Hayden traveled along the Front Range of Colorado, describing the geological formations and collecting fossils. In his very extensive notes, he does not detail where the discovery of this fossil took place, which was supposedly found somewhere in Middle Park in the northern part of Colorado, maybe near Hot Sulphur Springs, which he visited. The problem is that this region of Colorado, it really lacks Jurassic Age rocks. And when the specimen was sent to Joseph Leidy to describe, he attributed it to the Cretaceous. Now, Hayden was a brilliant geologist, and he was very familiar with the sequence of Jurassic and Cretaceous rocks in Colorado. And if the first specimen is from the Cretaceous, it may not represent Allosaurus at all. And if it came from the late Cretaceous Middle Park Formation, it would be contemporary with Tyrannosaurus. So Leidy initially referred this particular specimen that was collected by Hayden on January 11th, 1870, to Poeciliopleuron vandus, and placed the specimen in the Smithsonian Museum as catalog number 218. Now, Poeciliopleuron is a genus of dinosaur discovered in France, in Normandy, and described in 1836 and 1837. And Leidy had access to the monograph and plates illustrating the specimen from France, and he noticed many similarities. Now, Poeciliopleuron is a middle-sized theropod from the Jurassic period of Europe, but it does not get much attention today since the holotype sadly was destroyed during World War II. Enough of the casts of the original specimen exist today to compare it, but few other specimens have come to light since 1944. Now, Leidy noted that the vertebrae from Colorado was much larger but similar to this theropod dinosaur from Europe. Now, based on this isolated caudal tail vertebrae in Colorado, Leidy decided to name it a new genus in 1873, which he named Antrodemus. However, given its locality, looking at the partial caudal vertebrae in the museum, it's equally likely that Antrodemus is actually another type of large theropod. In fact, it has a probably higher probability of belonging to Tyrannosaurus rex, and if discovered in the latest Cretaceous formation weight, it would make more sense that it actually belongs to a Tyrannosaurid. But the name Antrodemus was entered into the scientific literature and would be used to refer to many of the large theropod dinosaurs found in the American West, principally by workers after 1873. But it was not used by the eccentric paleontologists of Cope and Marsh. Now, during the 1870s, Cope and Marsh would inflict the world of paleontology with numerous, and I I mean numerous names of dinosaurs. Each bone that they excavated, no matter how fragmentary, would be given a new name, resulting in this huge proliferation of scientific names for dinosaurs. Both were at war with each other to see who could name the most fossils, and the discoveries of dinosaurs in the American West fueled this battle. In 1877, Denver newspapers reported the discovery of large dinosaur bones near Canyon City, Colorado, in Garden Park. These bones were to be sent and shipped to Edward Cope in Philadelphia for scientific description. They had been discovered by a school teacher named Henry Fetch, and the bones were impressive, and he hoped that he could earn some money from further excavations. Marsh sent one of his collectors, a man named Benjamin Mudge, to attempt to find where these dinosaur bones were being found and see if he could excavate some of these fossils to send back to Marsh. Now, Mudge would discover another site nearby in August of 1877, and then he actually hired Henry Fetch and his brother to help with the excavations on his side. So he captured the supply of dinosaur bones that were going to Cope. So the quarry was named the Fetch Quarry, and it was excavated for several months from September to October in 1877, with those bones being sent back to Marsh to describe. So they were both very eager to describe these dinosaurs. Marsh was very eager because he knew that he had captured the supply, and he named Allosaurus fragilis from the scrappy material that was sent to him at the end of 1877, hoping to prevent Cope from naming dinosaurs he had obtained from the same year. So Allosaurus fragilis is based on a tooth, two dorsal vertebrae, and a proximal phalanx, or a toe bone. The catalog number is Yale Peabody Museum, 1930. Now, not much to establish a new dinosaur name on, but enough to lay claim to dinosaurs in Colorado before Cope could describe his fossils. So Edward Drinker Cope followed by naming his fossils from the Jurassic Morrison Formation in Garden Park, Colorado. He named his specimen that he had found Epanteris amplexus, its catalog number American Museum 5767, which consists of 3 vertebrae, a coracoid, and a metatarsal. It's not a very complete specimen, and Cope didn't even know what type of dinosaur that these belong to. But today most scientists attribute it to Allosaurus, the same dinosaur Marsh described a few months earlier from the same area. So both Allosaurus fragilis and Epanteris amplexus were found from Garden Park, Colorado, and scientists have debated over whether the names should be considered valid or not. Because Marsh beat out Cope in naming Allosaurus fragilis, it has stood as the valid name today, but both are based on really scrappy remains. Now, Marsh began collecting fossils from Como Bluff, Wyoming, up further north near Medicine Bow, Wyoming, from the Jurassic Morrison Formation. And he named a new species the following year, in 1878, Allosaurus lucreus, from some vertebrae, pectoral elements, and some limb bones. And that he placed in a catalog number Yale Peabody Museum, 1931. While Cope named Hypsirophorus discurius. What a horrible name. It's based only on a neural spine of the vertebrae, and it's under catalog number American Museum 5731, and it was found in Garden Park, Colorado. Then, not to be outdone, Marsh returned with his newest dinosaur in late 1878. He named it Curiosaurus atrox, a little bit better name, which was the most complete specimen to date, and it included a right premaxilla, jugal, sacral vertebrae, lumbar vertebrae, caudal vertebrae, some phalanxes, an ilium, and astragalus. It was found at Como Bluff, Wyoming, and the fossil was collected by Samuel Williston, who had also worked at Garden Park, Colorado the year before for Marsh. And that specimen is cataloged as Yale Peabody Museum 1890. Now, Marsh followed in 1879 with a new dinosaur, Labrasaurus sulcius, and it's based on a single tooth from Garden Park, Colorado. So, in a short span of time from 1877 to 1879, seven names were proposed, all of which have been referred to as likely specimens of Allosaurus from the Jurassic Morrison Formation, or maybe even dubiously affiliated with Allosaurus. So Marsh rolled out a new name for a similar dinosaur in the 1880s, describing a new species of Labrasaurus he called Labrasaurus ferox. And it's based on a lower jaw that lacks teeth, and it's from Garden Park, Colorado, and it's cataloged in the Smithsonian collection as 2315. Now, despite all of these names, scientists really did not have a good idea of what this dinosaur looked like and what name they should use. So instead of using Cope or Marsh's names, they would often refer to this dinosaur as Antrodemus. So by the turn of the century, the list of names was really long and complex and just a complete mess. So after Cope and Marsh had died, Charles Gilmore, who was at the Smithsonian, he was the first worker to try to detangle the mess of names. And what he did was basically establish Leidy's name of Antrodemus as the characteristic Jurassic meat-eating dinosaur of the Morrison Formation in the 1920s. And he did this by erecting a topotype in the Smithsonian specimen 4734, which is a beautifully preserved skeleton from Garden Park, Colorado, that was identified by Marsh before he died as Allosaurus fragilis, but referred to as Antrodemus valdians using Leidy's nomenclature by Gilmore. Now, the Smithsonian specimen 4734 bears special mention, because it was the specimen that first gave scientists a good picture of what this dinosaur really looked like. The specimen was collected in 1879 from Garden Park, Colorado, and it features a partial skull, a right lower jaw, a complete set of presacral and sacral vertebrae, a few ribs, pelvis, and some really nice, virtually complete arms and legs. There's some debate whether 1315, the type specimen of Labrasaurus ferox, also belongs to the specimen, since it's the left lower jaw, missing from the specimen. So the specimen was placed on display at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. But interestingly enough, it was not the first Allosaurus specimen to be given a display at a museum. And that belongs to a box that was created up, and it was sent to Edward Drinker Cope from excavations at Como Bluff, Wyoming. Now, this box had been left unopened during Cope's life, and as he raced around naming dinosaurs and writing papers and stuff. And before his death, Cope willed his collection of fossils to the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, where the unopened box was sent after he died. So this would have been the best unboxing video if they had YouTube back then, because when they opened the box, inside was a beautifully preserved skeleton. So in 1903, the specimen was put on display. It was the first large therapod dinosaur to be mounted in a museum, and it drew large crowds. The skull was largely sculpted based on Marsh's earlier specimen of 4734, but enough of the skeleton was preserved to give a good picture of the animal. And I love this display because it has not changed since 1903. Whereas the Smithsonian Museum display of 4734 has undergone multiple revisions since its discovery. It's currently reconstructed as of 2014 as if it's on a nest of eggs resting on the ground. The first rather complete specimen of Allosaurus from Utah was discovered in 1924 at Dinosaur National Monument in the Carnegie Quarry, which is located in the northeastern part of the state. This is dinosaur 2560. It's on display at the Quarry building north of Jensen, Utah, and it's a beautifully complete skull. So you're likely asking yourself, when did we start calling Allosaurus Allosaurus rather than Antrodemus valdians? Well, this did not happen until the 1970s with the work of one guy, James Madsen. In the 1930s, the University of Utah discovered dinosaur bones in the Jurassic Morrison Formation on the north side of the San Rafael Swell. This dinosaur quarry would become one of the richest accumulations of Allosaurus bones ever discovered. The quarry included over 47 individuals of Allosaurus. It's known as the Cleveland-Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry. It's a strange assemblage of carnivorous meat-eating dinosaurs. Most of those are identified as Allosaurus, and the bones are highly scattered about and disarticulated. James Madsen worked as the paleontologist at the site to help oversee the dig from the 1960s until the late 1980s, and reconstructed this skeleton. In 1976, James Madsen published his famous monograph on Allosaurus, re-erecting the name Allosaurus rather than Antrodemus, and providing some of the most amazing images of a creature that lived 150 million years ago. Now, James Madsen argued that Antrodemus was based on too fragmentary material from a kind of we don't really know, and he advocated for the Smithsonian 4734 to be the neotype, new type for the species Allosaurus fragilis. So museum displays were updated to begin calling this dinosaur Allosaurus. And new displays were made to illustrate all these wonderful new bones that were known of this creature. And the massive bone bed of the Cleveland-Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry revolutionized our image of predatory dinosaurs in the late 1970s, spurring what became known as the dinosaur renaissance of the 1980s and 1990s. Over 65 museums exhibit Allosaurus skeletons that come from this one quarry, including most of the specimens on display in Salt Lake City at the Utah Natural History Museum and at the Prehistoric Museum in Price. In 1979, another amazing Allosaurus specimen was discovered. It's one of my favorite specimens of Allosaurus, in part because of who discovered it. It was discovered by a 12-year-old girl named India Wood. India Wood is a legend in paleontology, and when she was a girl, she was dumped off at a remote ranch in northwestern Colorado during the summer by her divorced parents. And during the summer, she discovered a dinosaur in Jurassic rock layers on the ranch's property. She later brought the dinosaur bones to the attention of the Denver Museum, which returned with her to finish excavating the site, led by kind of a drunken paleontologist and his son. The specimen is now on display at the Denver Museum, and her story is really an amazing one. She's currently writing a very personal memoir about the dinosaur discovery, which I hope is made into a movie and eventually published. So you should definitely check out her synopsis and first chapter on our website. I've linked below because I hope to hear more of this discovery. She's one of my personal heroes in paleontology. Now, India Wood's dinosaur discovery and the work of James Madsen ushered in a new period of dinosaur craze that would lead to many new excavations of Allosaurus. During this time, all specimens were attributed to Allosaurus fragilis, a single species that ranged across North America. In the 1990s, two dinosaurs were discovered that would make headlines years after their initial discovery. and represent a second species of Allosaurus, the official naming of which would take 30 years, a very different length of time than the speedy naming of dinosaurs by Cope and Marsh in the 1870s. Now, the first specimen was associated with a famous dinosaur quarry called the Howell Quarry. It was excavated by the American Museum in the 1930s near Shell, Wyoming, in the northern part of Wyoming near the Bighorn Mountains. The excavations were led by Barnum Brown. This is the man who discovered Tyrannosaurus rex. And it included a team of paleontologists with great hats. Except for this guy. Poor guy. Doesn't have a hat. Now, the Howell Quarry is an amazing dinosaur quarry, which was located on a ranch that was originally owned by Barker Howell. The site was filled with bones of the iconic large sauropod dinosaurs, but few Allosaurus remains were found. In 1991, some Swiss privately funded dinosaur hunters purchased the rights to reopen the private quarry, but they were not having much luck. Then they started searching the surrounding land for dinosaurs, and they came across a beautifully preserved Allosaurus. They brought in heavy equipment, they built a road to the site. Unfortunately, they had ventured into public land owned by the federal government of the United States. The BLM was called in after it was reported that people had illegally constructed a road on public land, and the feds discovered a tarp covering a complete dinosaur, Allosaurus, that became known as Big Al. So Big Al was turned over to 2 local museums to help excavate, and no criminal charges were filed to the Swiss paleontologists. The dinosaur became cataloged in the Montana Museum of the Rockies as Moore 693. The skeleton was about 95% complete and somewhat articulated, with a beautiful complete skull. A cast of the dinosaur is on display at the University of Wyoming's Geology Museum in Laramie, as well as the Museum of the Rockies in Montana. Big Al got its own documentary in the year 2000 as a 2-part follow-up to the successful British television documentary series Walking with Dinosaurs. It's an incredible specimen known for its many injuries. Now, the Swiss paleontologists, they kept working in the area, and they found a second Allosaurus named Big Al II for their museum back in Europe. The area around Howell Quarry near Shell, Wyoming has been reinvestigated by a number of museums and private dig sites since, and most are pulling out a lot of sauropod dinosaurs like Camarasaurus, but several additional specimens of Allosaurus have been found over the years. The next Allosaurus specimen that bears mentioning was found in 1990 in Dinosaur National Monument, with excavation going from 1990 to 1997. The skeleton was beautifully articulated, but it was missing a skull. It was found in hard sandstone that was tilted by the uplift of the mountains over millions of years. The specimen was lifted out by helicopter, and preparation was carried out at the quarry building inside Dinosaur National Monument by Ann Elder and Scott Madsen, and seen by thousands of visitors to the National Monument in Utah, including a much younger me when I visited the quarry in the summer of 1996, back when I was in college. The skull was eventually found using gamma ray detection, a method to detect radioactive elements, and it was found to be nearly a meter away from the quarry site, locked in the hard sandstone. After the skeleton and skull were prepared, casts were made and put on display with the intention of naming it a new species of Allosaurus named after James Madsen. The specimen is known as 11541, and it's the holotype for a species of Allosaurus named Allosaurus madseni that was described in 2020. Now, before I dive into what made people think that this specimen was a new species, I want to talk about two other specimens of Allosaurus. The first is an Allosaurus specimen that was found 5,000 miles away in Portugal in 1999, not far from Lisbon. At first, it was thought to belong to Allosaurus fragilis, but was given a new species name, Allosaurus europteus. What is interesting is that parts of the skull were found of this dinosaur that compare very, very, very closely with Allosaurus fragilis from North America. So during the Jurassic period, Europe and North America were much closer together, with the Atlantic Ocean just slowly starting to open up in a rift valley between the two continents. And Allosaurus appears to have had a huge geographic range, which is similar to large predators today, such as many bears and wolves, and in the recent past, lions in the Northern Hemisphere. So Allosaurus was able to make its way all the way over to Europe. Now, the second specimen I want to talk about, it was found in Colorado near the same site that India Wood found the specimen at the Denver Museum. This specimen was found by Dana Forbes, a local resident and school teacher in 2000, who owned a ranch with exposures of the Jurassic Morrison Formation that's north of town, just inland adjacent to Dinosaur National Monument. Now, Forbes belongs to a religious sect that believes that the Earth is very young, and he partnered with a man named Joe Taylor, who runs a tiny museum and ministry in Texas near Lubbock. The two excavated the specimen of Allosaurus from 2000 to 2002, but in 2002 they partnered with a man named Pete DeRosa, who ran a business in Florida called Creation Expeditions that runs a series of religious schools in Florida, and he wanted to make the dinosaur dig a summer activity for his school children back east to visit. So between 2002 and 2004, the dig was open up to religious school groups from the East Coast to visit. And Pete DeRosa offered to buy the dinosaur from Forbes and Tyler for over $100,000. And one of the participants of the dig that summer was a wealthy congressman and his daughter from North Carolina by the name of Mark Meadows, who purchased the entire ranch from Dana Forbes in 2004. Dana then used the money to start a local charter school in town, which closed in 2007. And Pete DeRosa, in the purchase agreement, had a disclosure that the dinosaur and any information about it could not be released to the public, or the contract would be void. Then Pete DeRosa argued that Joe Taylor had talked about the dinosaur and even featured it in a video at his museum, thus nullifying the agreement. And Joe Taylor never got the money. So Pete DeRosa now had a dinosaur that he could use to promote his schools. So DeRosa and Meadows hoped to make the ranch a summer destination for religious groups, but the business was starting to lose money. In 2013, the religious school got caught up in a pedophilia scandal, and the dinosaur and the ranch became a liability, and both were sold to a church called Answers in Genesis, ministered by an Australian named Ken Ham, who's probably well known on YouTube for his religious and anti-science views. And he was at that time building an ark in Kentucky. Now, Answers in Genesis purchased the ranch and currently has no plans for further excavations on the site, so it's basically kind of closed to any sort of scientific investigations. In any case, the Allosaurus is actually on display in Kentucky, and it features a skull that is characteristic of Allosaurus fragilis, but has not been described formally in any publications. Now, I bring this specimen up because there are 4 nice skulls of Allosaurus from around Dinosaur National Monument, and only one is referred to as a separate species, Allosaurus madseni. The other 3 specimens, we can refer those to Allosaurus fragilis. Now there's one other specimen, a couple other specimens that are referred to as Allosaurus madseni. The other one is the Big Owl specimen from northern Wyoming, and Big Owl 2. Both of them are from near the Howell Quarry. So there's no kind of geographic isolation between the two species. They appear to live in a similar geographic range, although not enough is really known about the correlative stratigraphy to say if they existed at the same time in history. So now I want to kind of talk a little bit about what physically distinguishes Allosaurus fragilis from Allosaurus madseni, and it has to do principally with the jugal bone. So in Allosaurus madseni, the jugal bone does not curve downward or ventrally from the skull, whereas in Allosaurus fragilis, it has this distinct curve. Now, dinosaur specimen 11541, the holotype, is much smaller than Allosaurus fragilis, but that might be because it's a juvenile. Now, one of the questions I've had about this trait is whether it might not be ontogenetic. Might be that 11541 from Dinosaur National Monument and the Big Owl specimen are just juvenile specimens, and that as the animal grows, this jugal curves. Now, the large collection of jugal bones from the Cleveland Lloyd Quarry all show various aged individuals with a wide range of jugals, and they appear all to show this curvature, indicating that they all belong to Allosaurus fragilis. However, the ones from Dinosaur National Monument appear to be much more variable. Two specimens, likely collected by Jim Jensen from BYU, and I don't know exactly where they were found, show a non-curved jugal as well, and are interpreted as belonging to Allosaurus madseni, as does the two specimens from northern Wyoming. However, not figured are the other three specimens from near Dinosaur National Monument that do show curvature. So there may be a more northern form, that would be Allosaurus madseni, and a more southern form, Allosaurus fragilis, in this trait, with Dinosaur National Monument kind of at the border of the ranges of these two species with this slight overlap. So they're coexisting together. Now, there's been a follow-up paper that has shown that the interpretation of the anterior portion of the jugal is likely incorrect, with the jugal actually being part of the back or posterior part of the anorbital fenestra. Now, this is important because in large specimens, the jugal bone near its contact with the maxilla can be invaginated with a pneumatic cavity extending from the fenestra in the skull, and the curvature might be influenced by this cavity in some individuals. The fact that the anterior part of the jugal is part of the anorbital fenestra actually suggests that Allosaurus europaeus is likely just Allosaurus fragilis. They should just synonymize the two, but it does not negate this trait in Allosaurus madseni, which may be valid. Now, there's another character that distinguishes Allosaurus madseni from Allosaurus fragilis, and that is the crest at the top of the skull. So in Allosaurus specimens they all have these crests and kind of rugose areas on their lacrimal bones, but Allosaurus madseni appears to have crests, or more pronounced crests on the nasal bones as well. And I've always been really fascinated with this rugose surface, these rough crests on the lacrimal bones and the nasal bones of Allosaurus, which give the skull of Allosaurus a really unique look. So these nasal bones add a little bit more flair. Now, crests in birds are often formed by the invagination of sinuses, either from the avian respiratory system or from the brain cavity, like in domestic breeds of chickens, like Polish crested and silky chickens, in which the skull is expanded by herniation of the central nervous system. So that's not so in Allosaurus, which compose these crests from thickening of the bone. So an example of a living bird that's thickening of the bone to serve as crests is the crested guinea fowl skull in Africa. Now in life, these birds, they exhibit crazy hair pieces of downy and curly feathers that is used to distinguish different species. So I wondered if these crests in Allosaurus served as support for feathers on top of the head that could distinguish different species. And Allosaurus madseni may have had a more pronounced fluffy top of feathers atop of its head. So this gave me an idea to do a reconstruction of the new species of Allosaurus madseni, basically using these crests as support for feathers like those seen in the crested guinea fowl. Now, the only reconstruction I've seen that's been put out there is a beautiful reconstruction, kind of almost snake-like, very reptilian reconstruction. And I thought I would do a very different reconstruction using feathers. So to do this, I first drew the skull, and then I drew over the skull with flesh, skin, scales, and feathers using pencil. It's a unique and equally plausible look at what Allosaurus might have been with this big, huge pluff of plumes.